Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
Actually, they used to throw fish overboard under the ODU rules. Now they're discarding the fishermen themselves.
Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guests, gossip, news and stories from our studios at GB News here in the heart of Westminster. This week, Brexit was back. Yes, 9 years after Britain's voted to leave the European Union, the new Labour government unveiled a new framework to deliver on that vote, as they see it, in 2016. We saw a 12-year agreement for EU trawlers to plunder UK waters for fish, hundreds of millions of pounds to modernise our UK fishing fleet, checks on animals and plant products, they say, removed completely, and UK steel industry protected from tariffs. Plus, holidaymakers and travellers can use passport electronic gates when arriving and leaving EU member states, but that's subject to the member state allowing it, and can take their cats and dogs with them on pet passports. Defence companies will at some point get access to a £150 million defence fund called SAFE, while others we've signed up to a new emissions trading scheme so UK companies will not be hit by a UK carbon tax next year. Now, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, he praised the deal as a fresh start to deliver a trading arrangement which works for Britons, he says, and may even bring down the price of goods in shops and possibly maybe, boost growth. But others were less sure. Certainly the Conservatives called it a surrender document. And I asked Prime Minister at the press conference in Lancaster House on Monday, whether we've been stitched up like a kipper. Here's what I asked him.
So as you know, Sir Keir Starmer, critics say your deal turns us into rule takers, not rule makers on standards. The Scottish Fishermen Association or Federation say your deal is a horror show, far worse than Boris Johnson's botched Brexit agreement. Are they right? Have you been stitched up like a kipper by the European Union?
Chris, let me again repeat the driving principles behind this deal, which are really important, which is the question, does it bring down bills? And I think it's really important to see the reaction of supermarkets, of Salmon Scotland, to begin to answer that question, because they are celebrating this because they know it will reduce prices. And we all know how hard the cost of living crisis is bearing down on working people, and therefore bringing down bills is hugely important. Does it boost jobs in security, in defence, steel, of course, and, of course, across all those areas affected by the SPS agreement, energy and electricity also within the scope of this. And then, of course, does it take vital measures to help protect our borders? And this goes beyond what we've been able to do before in answering those questions. So they are the principles that we set for this. I think it's important to remember in relation to fishing that next year, under the old arrangement, we didn't cease to have any EU fishing in our waters. We simply went to a year-on-year negotiation, which means there's no stability for anybody. And because of the SPS zone being permanent, that does mean for fishing communities that the fish can be sold into the European market. And when 72% of your fish is into the European market, that makes a material difference in terms of cutting the red tape and the bureaucracy. And of course it unlocks some of the shellfish, etc., which couldn't be sold into the market at all until we made this arrangement. And I think it is important to emphasise again the £360 million transformation fund to fishing communities, which has never been put in place before. And that's why the comprehensive nature of this deal across so many strands is totally focused on that question. Does it bring down bills? Does it drive up jobs? And does it help us take control of our borders? And it answers all of those questions, which I think are fundamentally important for working people. Thank you.
That's it. Sir Keir Starmer replying there, not adopting the idea of kippers for my answer. But who's right? Does this deal signal a winding back on Brexit freedoms fought for so hard by Brexiteers in 2016, or a betrayal of that vote to leave the European Union? Later, I'll be joined by Sir Bill Cash. Yes, him again. The guy who fought for 40 years to get the UK out of the European Union. He's left politics, but he's back on GB News to say why he thinks this deal is a betrayal. With me first now is the man behind it, Nick Thomas-Symonds, the Cabinet Office Minister, the architect of the deal. Nick Thomas-Symonds, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. Now, on Monday, I asked your boss, the Prime Minister, if he'd been stitched up like a kipper. Was it unfair?
Well, firstly, just say it's great to join you on your podcast, and I don't think that was accurate at all. And let me just say, first of all, in relation to this deal more generally, and we'll come on then to some specific issues. But first of all, I've been negotiating for a deal that was going to give us more secure borders, that was going to also have other benefits like lowering household bills as well, but also absolutely helping with the cost of living. And that is precisely what this bill is going to achieve. It's going to be good for jobs, lowering bills, but also securing our borders. And that was what the government delivered.
That's
in
what
our
I'm saying,
national
right?
interest.
Because Brexit gets tied up in a sovereignty debate, doesn't it? Every idea is far removed from ordinary people who are worried about the cost of things in shops and getting easily into the continent.
This is about a direct positive impact on people's lives, but just to take on that issue of sovereignty just for a moment, because what this government has been doing in recent weeks is exercising sovereignty. We have agreed a deal between the UK and India. As you will know from your Brexit years very well, Chris, I think Prime Minister Boris Johnson promised it by Diwali. He didn't say which Diwali, in fairness, but never delivered it, but this government did. An economic deal with the United States, which was long promised for many years, but this government has delivered. And then the third deal that this government has delivered, which is improved trade terms with the European Union. Those are sovereign choices that Britain's making.
And at what cost? I mean, do you view Brexit as a mistake to be mitigated or an opportunity to be grasped?
Well, these are the opportunities of Brexit we are grasping. It's an independent... It was... Whether decisions the country has made in the past are good or bad is a debate we are leaving in the past. We are moving on. The question that I am asking myself today is, for the Britain of the mid-2020s, what are the best sovereign decisions we can make? Now, we have said that we will not be choosing between our allies. We believe our national interest lies in deepening our tradings with both the United States and the European Union, but not just those two economies, but also around the world as well. That's why we've secured the trade deal with India. So it is a hard-headed, I call it ruthlessly pragmatic approach about what is best for Britain now. And that's what we're pursuing.
And are we now rule takers, not rule makers? That's the sovereignty question again. I say that because we're now signing up for access to the parts of the single market we couldn't get into before. That's a good thing, but then we have to accept, don't we, rules made by Brussels we can't.
Well, let me just take this argument, because first of all, we are already aligning with European rules and laws in a number of areas for absolutely no economic benefit presently.
Just because we want to
presently
make it because
it is easier to trade, good for businesses. You only have to look, by the way, at business reaction, where they look at the energy sector, the defence sector, supermarkets up and down the land talking about the downward pressure on prices this deal will bring. But also, in terms of the arrangements that we've secured, it is not the case that somehow the European Union will be unilaterally imposing new laws on the United Kingdom. If you look at the arrangements here, in any trade deal, you have to have some sort of mechanism for resolving disputes. What happens here is we will have a role in rule shaping. It will then be for Parliament, our Parliament, to actually look at, consider and pass particular laws or statutory instruments. There's then an independent arbitration panel. And, there's often this...
CJ, isn't it?
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's an independent arbitration panel. Now, the arbitration panel would refer, if there is, on a matter of European Union law, of course, the European Court of Justice has then the role in its interpretation, but its decision comes back to the independent arbitration panel. And an independent arbitration panel is what you would find in any trade deal. If Britain is not prepared to sign up to independent arbitration mechanisms, you wouldn't be able to do any trade deals around the world, and that's an absurd position.
Okay. The ERG, the European Research Group of Tory MPs, we remember them from the...
We do.
They're still going. Smaller, of course, after your last night last July. They say this deal lacks democratic accountability. Now, I think there'll be a vote on elements of it. The SPS, as the phytosanitary agreement, that goes to a vote in Parliament. Is that right? Or will there be a treaty attached to this document?
So let me just make 2 points. The democratic mandate for this comes from the general election. The mandate for the SPS agreement is in the manifesto, and what we set out in the manifesto was we wouldn't go back to the single market, customs union, or freedom of movement, but the objectives for this negotiation are set out. It returned 411 Labour members of Parliament, which is a thumping mandate for these negotiations. Secondly, in relation to the SPS agreement, that will require a piece of legislation. So a bill, no, require a bill in Parliament. I've debated members of the ERG many times. I'm sure we will have more debates. They will have plenty of chance to have their say during the passage of the legislation. And like any piece of legislation, it will be voted on in Parliament. And by the way, I welcome the debate and let me just say why. Because if the opposition parties, whether it's Reform or the Conservatives, are seriously going to go into the general election saying they want to undo this deal, they are saying that they want more barriers to trade, which will mean prices going up in our supermarkets, the price of the weekly shop going up. They are saying they don't want to go into energy arrangements to lower bills. They want to risk putting them up. And they are also going to be saying that the additional tools we now have around things like sharing facial recognition, sharing information about tackling serious and organised crime, boats in the Channel, they want to give those tools away. If that is not a credible position for a party of opposition, let alone one that aspires to government.
I mean, unfashionably, I think politically, you can go into the election next time looking into the next decade, whereas the other parties may be looking back into the last decade and fighting battles which have been very divisive for a lot of families. So I think that is politically puts you in quite a strong position at the next election. That aside, what do you say to fishermen who cry betrayal? That we wanted 4 years extension of these arrangements from last year. You gave them the French demanded 12, or the EU demanded 12. They cry betrayal.
Not a single additional fish can be taken out of British waters by European fishers as a consequence.
You're freezing the agreement this year, aren't you?
Of this rolling over the existing arrangements. Now, I indicated some months ago an openness to a multi-annual deal to give stability. But what the fishers will now have, in addition to those existing arrangements, is much better access to the European Union market. And as of today, 70% of our catch is exported to the European Union market. And what the SPS, the Agreement on Agricultural Products, Food and Drink, will mean is there'll be far less red tape, fewer barriers in order to export to the European market. But in addition to that, we are saying to fishers, we want you to take advantage of those new opportunities. So we will be investing £360 million in fishing and upgrading the fleet to really take advantage of it. So that is a positive situation going forward.
So currently, is it the case that crustaceans at the border are held in a lorry for too long? Is that right?
Well, it's not just about.
Is that happening?
It's not just. Look, we've had stories from retailers about lorries.
At the beginning, not now.
Lorries. No, we've still had issues. Just look at what supermarkets and retailers have been saying in recent days about problems at the border. But it's also about products that at the moment we cannot export into the European market that we'll soon be able to again. So take mussels is one example of a seafood we would be able to export again. But there are other examples away from seafood products. Like, for example, I was in East London at a supermarket yesterday with British sausages that are once again going to be exported to the European market. This is a good thing for Britain.
Some questioning whether they want to buy our sausages, but that's different.
I am certain there'll be great demand for our British sausages across the EU.
I hope so. Dates, though, no dates for the e-passport gates being allowed to use by Brits. That's because member states must approve it. Will one or two agree it before the summer holidays?
Well, look, we will be pushing for that as soon as possible, because what this agreement now gives us is a clarity that wasn't there before. Very open statement that there is no legal barrier to doing this. And I think, listen, Chris, we can all look at our different positions, our different perspectives on the deal the government secured on money, but surely we can all agree we'd all like to spend less time in queues.
Yes, of course you would. So one or two this summer?
Listen,
of the 28.
I want to make progress
Are you in
as
talks now?
soon as possible. I'll be pushing this forward as soon as possible. Have no doubt, I want to make this difference for whether it's for people who want to go on holiday, people who want to study, people who want to work, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
We want people to spend more time doing what they want to do.
How much will it cost to get access to the single market? There's an admin charge, isn't there?
Well,
And now the Tories say it's in the billions because the Swiss pay hundreds of millions of euros themselves. So they've
the Swiss arrangement is completely and utterly different. This is a bespoke agreement for Britain, which, by the way, when we talked about this bespoke agreement previously, people said we wouldn't be able to get it. You've got to get this model, that model. We've actually secured a model that is right for Britain and the United Kingdom. But in terms of what we've said in terms of payments is we will only ever make payments for specific purposes or specific programs, not the general budget. We take a value for money approach. So, for example, we actually supported the previous government with their reaccession of the Horizon Research Programme. So it's in Britain's interests to do that. Yes, precisely. And we were supportive of that from opposition, and we continue with that approach. With the SPS agreement, it's payment for the administration of the SPS agreement, which is absolutely essential. Obviously, yeah, it's what is required to make the common standards work. That is in our interest, but have no doubt at all that the economic benefit that comes, not just from the SPS agreement, the fact that our linking our emissions trading systems mean we can avoid £800 million of EU carbon taxes, what we can do in the defence sector in terms of access to the procurement fund, what we do on energy, all the economic benefits dwarf any cost of administration.
So it's less than £800 million, then, is it?
Well, no, it's much more than the overall benefit. The overall benefit of this package is far more than
what
the
is
figure
the
is.
saying for the admin side and the SPR?
Well, look, that is going to be now the negotiation on implementation. But the point I'm making about payments is we're not going to make general payments that you budget specific purposes assessed on the basis of value for money. But my overall point is that with the SPS, the benefits dwarf any cost of administration.
What is the cost, though?
Well, that is what we will negotiate precisely. Well, I never prejudge negotiations in that way, Chris.
My podcast,
Chris, not even for Chopper's political podcast. But what we will do now is obviously have a negotiation around implementation. But my view is I want to get it into place as soon as possible.
Low hundreds of millions of pounds.
You're tempting me, Chris. But it's a matter of negotiation.
In the studio,
just between us.
Between us. Okay, good. Under 30s, freedom of movement, that's worrying people. Boris Johnson says 80 million people can get access to the UK or something.
Absolute nonsense.
So what is the cap going to be?
Absolute nonsense from Boris Johnson. But in terms of this, first of all, let me just say, as a matter of principle, this is a good thing for young people across the United Kingdom who want to go abroad to work, study, travel, experience different cultures. Okay, so let's just not underplay the opportunity for young people here in Britain. But we've also set out a series of principles for this scheme. So first of all, time limited. Secondly, there will be a cap, so it will be consistent with the government's overall objective of lowering the level of net migration. That's what was set out in our migration white paper. So we're not going to agree. When we've got, by the way, if you look at the wording of the text, it has to be mutually agreed. So we have a veto on that. So it has to be the case that it's consistent with the objective of lowering net migration.
So would it be, well, again, I'm asking you for figures here, aren't I? Because I have to do 100,000, 200,000 a year, and is capped for 2 years or 1 year? Is that how it works?
The kind of models we have in mind are looking at the 13 existing youth mobility schemes that exist. New Zealand, Uruguay has another one. But if you look at those schemes, nobody is suggesting remotely that they amount to freedom of movement. We don't have freedom of movement with Uruguay.
No.
Nobody is suggesting that. This is something very distinct that we will have a veto over numbers and control. But in addition to that, let's not underplay the importance for young Brits.
Is it annually? You'll set it annually, will you? Or will it be over a 5-year period?
Well, these are matters for the discussions we're now going to have. But we're confident in the principles that we have. But we're also confident of the benefit for young people in Britain. And let's talk about why that will be a great advantage.
Well, yes, for money, but if they bring their families, they can stay here.
No. Very, very strictly controlled. Okay. But let's look at the advantage for young Brits too.
Okay, good. Are you worried the Tories and Reform UK may try and veto these plans? I mean, I guess you'll have them better than me, won't you, by the election?
I just think that the Tories and Reform have got themselves into an awful position around this. I mean, Kemi Badenoch seems to have opposed the India deal. She seems to be opposing the US deal. She seems to be opposing this deal.
She calls it.
I've no idea who she wants Britain to trade with. I mean, she doesn't want Britain to trade with the largest economy in India. She does, the largest population, largest market in India. She doesn't want Britain to trade with the largest economy, the United States. She doesn't want Britain to trade with our largest trading partner, the EU. That is not a credible position. And if seriously she wants to go into the next election, and indeed same goes for Reform, and say we want to add burdens to business, we want to add red tape, we want you to face more barriers to exporting, we don't want you to have these tools to tackle illegal migration. And by the way, we're not concerned about household bills on energy. That is frankly absurd. And by the way, a debate we would welcome.
Do you want to see the European Scrutiny Committee reconvened? I've got Sir Bill Cash on the podcast shortly. He's back. 40 years campaign for the European to leave the European Union. He'll give his verdict on your deal.
I've no doubt he will. But in terms of parliamentary scrutiny, that's obviously a matter for Parliament. I am someone who has great admiration for Parliament. I enjoy appearing in Parliament. I look forward to taking the bill. I welcome scrutiny in any form Parliament wishes to subject me to. I think I've appeared before a number of different select committees already in the past 10 months. Look, it's a matter for Parliament how it organises its committees, and however it wishes to, I will appear before them.
And just finally, Nick Clegg, the former Deputy Prime Minister, he said this week in a speech to mark 15 years since the coalition was formed, it's time to choose. He says we can't always be trying to find this middle ground between the European Union and the US. You're shaking your head. You think we can have this middle path between those two big trading blocks?
It's not can, it's we must.
Yeah.
It's we must. And we do not choose between our allies. We have a hugely important relationship with the United States, special relationship that is born out of deep historical shared experience, whether it is in security, defence or trade. It's an absolutely vital relationship that is flourishing, by the way, and I think will only get deeper. In addition to that, we have £800 billion worth of trade with the European Union. We have the return of war to our continent with Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. It is vital we deepen cooperation there as well. And by the way, we have been showing, not by words, but by deed in recent weeks, with trade deal with India, United States and the EU. We're not just saying you don't have to choose to analyse, we're actually doing it.
And just finally, is this deal the start of the inevitable destination of rejoining the European Union?
No. And it is a hard-headed assessment of where we are in the 2020s. It's moving away from the debates of the past. We are looking what is in Britain's interest for the next 10 or 15 years, not the last 10 years. And
you're not rejoining?
No. What we are doing is delivering on our mandate. We're not rejoining the single market, the customs union, or freedom of movement. And I should say, Chris, what we are doing is making Brexit work.
Here we go. We'll wait and see. Nick Thomas-Symonds, thank you for coming and joining us today. And a big week for you, but telling our viewers and listeners about this deal. Next up, it's Bill Cash, CH, a companion of honour, of course, a very well-respected person in our political establishment, left politics last year at the last election, but the godfather of Brexit. He gave his life to delivering this idea of taking us out of the European Union. So Bill Cash, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
Lovely to see you, Chris.
Great to see you.
Yes.
He's looking younger and younger since you left politics.
I don't have withdrawal symptoms, but I'm still very much engaged. We had a debate last week, which I got quite a few references.
It's
great fun.
What does Stephen Dowdy say? He was the Foreign Office Minister.
Oh, he said the spectre of Bill Cash has come back into the House of Commons. That was a later evolution, but there you go.
Well, you're on the podcast here. Now, you saw the unveiling of the deal on Monday.
Yes.
Is this the Brexit you campaigned all those decades for when you were an MP?
No, it isn't. And it's a really serious problem, and it's a massive betrayal. And for this reason, that not only did we have the referendum in which the people decided, a real vote by real people, real voters, for their own self-government to decide that they didn't want to stay in this undemocratic European Union. Now, on top of that, when we actually got the legislation through to get out properly under Boris Johnson, after the general election of 2009, December
2019,
December
2020.
That's it. December 2019. we had an Act of Parliament which went through very soon after that, which had something called Section 38, which basically was about sovereignty. In fact, it was almost the same as the amendment I put down on the order paper in 1986, but that's another story.
Okay.
The reality is that this is described, and I'm now reading from their own statement, reaffirming our shared values and a commitment to deeper cooperation, and they talk about a strategic partnership. Those values are about our democracy, and this is an infringement. It is a complete and total rejection of our principles of democracy.
Nick Thomas-Symonds has told us earlier on the podcast he's pursuing what he calls ruthless pragmatism, and he would say, yes, sovereignty is, they would say, is protected.
No, it's not.
Well, let's get their idea out first. They say that we're not in the customs union, single market, and no return to freedom of movement. That is a triple lock on the Brexit ideal you fought for. But they're trying to be pragmatic and making it work for Britons, bring down costs in shops, make it easier to move goods into the European Union.
Well,
wrong.
This is straight out of the Harold Wilson playbook. I mean, this is 1975 all over again. It's all about economics. It was a load of rubbish then, and it's a load of rubbish now. The reality is that sovereignty is sovereignty, and it's actually set out in this Section 38.
Yeah.
Sorry to refer to a piece of legislation,
that's okay.
but it really matters. And that says that the British Parliament is sovereign. It states it in an Act of Parliament for the first
But
time.
we remain sovereign, or you think we don't now from this
Well,
deal?
what this actually says, what they're doing now is an infringement of that sovereignty on a big scale in serious matters. But apart from that, what the amendment that was put down, what the actual provision in Section 38 actually says, is that Parliament is sovereign. And then it goes on to say, notwithstanding, and then that effectively, without going into the detailed wording, says, despite the withdrawal agreement and despite the Northern Ireland Protocol. And actually, the bottom line is that what is happening now is an infringement of that Act of Parliament, because it says it unequivocally and it's clear and it's unambiguous. And that's the key thing. And therefore, the whole of this is a disingenuous hypocrisy. It's a betrayal, but it's even worse than that, because it's without reference back to the British people. It's without a mandate. They got fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in the last general election.
But they say they won that election, promising to get closer to the European Union. Nick Thomas-Symonds also told us there will be a vote on the SPS, this is the access to the single market, so there'll be a vote, a bill, an actual act of Parliament to allow the UK to start taking away all the red tape as they see it when we trade into the European Union.
Well, there is a very serious problem there. That is disingenuous in itself, because although it is true to say that by an Act of Parliament you can make an adjustment to other Acts of Parliament, when you get on to the issue of how you implement it, and in terms of constitutional law, you actually infringe the sovereignty of Parliament if you change the basis on which it was originally brought in. And there will be quite a big argument about the legitimacy and the lawfulness of these provisions, because actually the voting rights will be taken away from people in the country, and it's really a much bigger surrender than it looks. It's not a strategic partnership, it's actually a sellout.
12 years of guaranteed fishing quotas for fishermen rather than annual quotas. That gives them a chance to plan for the future, to borrow money against future stocks, that kind of thing. Is that not a better deal for fishermen? And they can sell their products into
No,
the
it's
European
not.
Union
No,
without any
not at all.
red tape.
I hear what the fishermen say.
They're very upset about it.
I'm telling you,
Labour's point.
Well, Labour's point is complete nonsense, and everybody knows it. The fishermen are furious, of course. And in fact, what has actually also happened is
Not
that
all
whereas,
fishermen, there's some-
some Scottish salmon people, I heard that, but not the generality at all. And the second thing is that actually they used to throw fish overboard under the ODU rules. Now they're discarding the fishermen themselves. That's the way I put it. No, it's a very serious infringement of the rights of not only sovereignty but also of a fisherman
But the
themselves.
TCO ran out next year, didn't it? The trade and cooperation agreement on the fishers quota. So that from that point on, you'd have annual negotiations.
Well,
more
ask the
uncertainty.
fishermen. They've made their position quite clear. They're the ones who know about this, and I've made my point already.
Yes. Is it time to bring back the European Scrutiny Committee?
Well, they abolished that, literally.
Let's remind the viewers, and this is what that was. You were the chair for 30 years, weren't you?
Well, I was the chair for 15 years.
15 years, but you're on the
I was on the
30
committee
years.
for 40 years. And actually, I think I can reasonably claim to know a little bit about it. What I can tell you is I wrote an article in the Telegraph about this, and I said what they're doing by abolishing it, they did it in one line, rescinding the standing orders for the European Scrutiny Committee on the last day of Parliament before the summer recess. I mean, it was actually you did. It was the first thing they did.
Yeah.
Why? Because they didn't want anyone to know what was going on. And what's happened with this strategic partnership, this strategic sellout, as I call it, actually is to completely avoid any scrutiny. And I said in my article that's what they were doing, to go behind closed doors, and they've done exactly what I thought.
Says he's open to parliamentary scrutiny. He's open to the.
Oh, is he? Well, he certainly can. Well, there's going to be a debate now on the question of whether or not the European Scrutiny Committee should be brought back.
Yes.
And actually, even Stella Creasy is arguing for it. So she's saying it should come back because Labour members were also members of that committee, although David Lammy, who was on my committee, never turned up.
Ironically, I think Stella Creasy comes in from a different point of view.
I'm sure she does.
Integration, not less
Well,
integration.
that may be, but it's scrutiny, it's accountability, it's the system.
We all agree with that. How much will we be paying into the, they call it an admin charge, to be part of this arrangement?
Well, first of all, don't believe what they say, because the first thing you don't know is what it's actually going to cost. It's just words. And
Thomas-Symonds told us moments ago it's up for negotiation. What's your estimate of that figure?
Well, I can't tell you, because I actually think it always turns out in the context of the European Union to be about twice what they say. So you cannot put any trust in what they say, and you can't put any trust in them adopting a system which infringes our sovereignty, but on top of that makes us subjugated yet again to the European Court of Justice. And this is really important. The lawmaking in the European Union, which will flow out of all this, because this is one step towards a process of attempting to rejoin, and it's not a reset. And there is another point I'd like to make.
Yes.
What actually happens when they make laws in the European Union, it is done in the Council of Ministers. That's where the lawmaking takes place, behind closed doors, and on top of that, by majority vote of the member states, and without even a transcript, no Hansard.
No hands, and this is no Hansard.
I said it over and over again in the House of Commons. You heard me say it before.
We are in your world rule takers, not rule makers.
That's it. Yeah.
The ECJ. I put this to Nick Thomas-Symonds moments ago, and he said. Yes, the ECJ does decide some things, but there'll be a separate kind of arbitration body.
I know.
You know all this stuff.
That's all for the birds. I've been there before. No, the bottom line is this is a re-subjugation of Britain in certainly important areas of lawmaking, which infringes our sovereignty, infringes our self-government, and infringes our democracy. So it's a really serious...
Subjugation is a big word.
It's a very big word.
How do you feel, though? I'm going to say it, Bill Cash. You had 8 years to do this.
Yes.
Your team, the Tory team, it never happened. You left yourself open to
it did.
Well, let me finish. You left yourself open, didn't you? Yeah. To Labour saying, hasn't worked, here's a new idea of Brexit.
No.
You had your chance, and your guys, not you, your guys, believe it.
It's very kind of you to say not you and my friends.
It wasn't you.
And my friends, because we voted against the withdrawal agreement.
One of the 20
and we
Spartans.
we got the Spartans. We got rid of Theresa May on that score. And on top of that, we've now got a situation where the actual laws which are made are now going to be made, and the Court of Justice was in Section 3 of the European Community Act 1972.
You had 8 years to do it,
still
Cash. That's what the viewers and listeners might be thinking.
Look, I voted against those with my friends on many occasions, but we won the overall battle. We got Section 38. The sovereignty was returned, the self-government to this country. We have the ability to do it. And if, for example, to just give one example on the illegal migration, which is also mentioned in these papers that the government has put out.
There's data sharing on facial recognition.
Well, all that sort of thing. And can I just simply say this? Actually, the amendment I put down, which was supported by about 100, or in fact, when you take into account people who agreed with us but didn't sign the motion, well over 150 people at least.
When was that?
That was during the Sunak time, but it was also previously as well. And I put down this amendment to override the Human Rights Act, to override the ECHR and international law in that context. And the bottom line is, and I make this very simple point, when the Rwanda judgment was made, the President of the Supreme Court actually said, under the principle of legality, that if the legislation is clear and unambiguous, irrespective of any other considerations like international law, the Supreme Court will back Parliament. And that is the most important point. So my amendment, had it gone through, and Nick Robinson did an interview, as you know, with Rishi Sunak, a 2-hour interview. And right at the end, he said, and what do you think about the ECHR? Would you do what you did before? And he said, no. He said, I've changed my mind. So, and that's the point. And by the way, I actually do share that frustration. And I have a great sense that we should have done much more, and we could have solved the problem of the boats as well. But that doesn't also...
So should there have been a deal on returns agreements, do you think, as part of this? A side deal saying, we'll do a deal on trade, but let's get a returns agreement agreed with the European Union.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. But basically, Chris, the point is simply this. We had the opportunity to do it. We had the law on our side. They didn't do it.
No.
It's a completely unacceptable situation. But despite that, the reality is that you have to have solutions in Parliament, in acts of Parliament. It's not enough to sort of, as it were, shout from the sidelines. And that's what's going on at the moment. And just if I may just make one last remark, on the question of reform at the moment, we do have to look
Reform
at...
UK?
Yes, indeed. We do have to look at the turnout issue, because when the local government elections took place quite recently, it was only 34% average turnout. So we saw that with the SDP before. But on the other hand, we have a lot in common with reform, and I've been on platforms with Nigel Farage.
Is it time to merge your parties?
I don't think that that's going to be a given, but what I'm saying is there is a lot of accommodation of certain principles that will lead to some understanding, but we shall see.
We can see. Where are we going next with Brexit? I mean, are you a bit depressed about it now?
No, I'm not, because I'm up for the fight. I'm absolutely up for the fight, and I hope to be able to continue, although I'm not in Parliament, because the fact that you're not in Parliament doesn't mean to say that you're
never going to stop fighting for it.
No, and I never will, because it's about our self-government. It's what people fought and died for. Think about that. We had the Dunkirk Day today. You know, these are really big things. And that's why I am absolutely determined to continue. The best way to keep a secret, by the way, is to make a speech in the House of Commons. So for practical purposes, outside the House of Commons, I'll continue to make my case.
So finally, you're writing your book.
Yes, I am.
There was some speculation it might be 12 volumes because you're known for being loquacious.
Yes.
It will be 400 pages long.
Yeah, it's about that. And but the basic point is this, that I will explain exactly what did happen over those 40 years, both during Thatcher and then afterwards with Blair, and then into all the other prime ministers, including, of course, Boris, who got Section 38 through.
Yes.
Notwithstanding the European Union laws.
So the fight goes on, Bill Cash.
The fight not only goes on, but it intensifies. That's the point. And we really are, providing we analyse and we explain and we say to people, this is about your self-government. You are the voters. We got the referendum as catalysts through. You voted to go out of the European Union, and we're going to stand with you. And that the Brexit system is the right thing to do, as Ambrose Evans Pritchard set out brilliantly in the Telegraph in the last few days.
Okay. Look, Sir Bill Cash, CH, former Conservative MP, the man who I think cradles the flame of Brexit the most in our country. Thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast.
It's been a complete pleasure.
It's great.
Thank you very much.
I'm looking younger by the day. I love it. Thank you to Sir Bill Cash, and thank you also, of course, earlier to Nick Thomas-Symonds, the architect of this Brexit this disaster, says Bill Cash off microphone. I tweet at Christopher Hope on X. Are you on Twitter, Bill Cash? I doubt it.
No, I have been on Twitter. I got up to about, I think, 930,000 on one Twitter. I do it very rarely, but it seems to get...
What's your name on Twitter? Do you know what your name is?
I can't remember. In any case, it's called X now, isn't it?
It's called it. Email me, chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast, Bill Cash has. You'd love to see him back in the studio here. Please do tell your friends. If you really enjoyed it, please do make sure that you leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and anywhere else where you hear your podcast. It helps other people to find it and join in the fun of this show we do. Thank the great team of GB News colleagues behind it, Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh back at the mothership in Paddington, and the podcast busy worker bees, the drones I call them, Rebecca Newns and George McMillan. Most importantly of all, thank you for listening wherever you are. If you want more Chopper in your life, Bill Cash does. Who doesn't? Catch me during the week on GB News with your latest political analysis and stories. I do keep up to date with our best reporting online at gbnews.com. But until next time, from me and Bill Cash, and earlier from Nick Thomas-Symonds, cheerio!